Welcome to Ultimate Revenge Tales. Tonight you'll step into my life, the life of a man who lost everything, not because of bad luck, but because of betrayal that cuts deeper than any knife. Stay until the end, because of the twist. You won't see it coming. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe if you enjoy what I do here, and drop a comment with where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's listening around the world. My name's Robert, but most people just call me Bob. I'm 53 years old, and I spent most of my adult life in corporate sales. Nothing glamorous, just a man in a suit with a firm handshake and a briefcase that always felt heavier than it should have been. I had a wife, Ellen, 30 years together. 2 kids, both grown now, are off living their own lives. The house had gotten quieter over the years, but it was still home. Dinner at the table, bills stacked neatly on the counter, Ellen's perfume faints on the sheets. Normal life. Work, though that's where my pride lived. I wasn't the smartest man in the room, but I was steady. I closed deals others couldn't. I listened more than I talked, and clients trusted me for that. After 28 years, I thought loyalty meant something. Thought respect meant something, but things started changing. Little things. Meetings I wasn't invited to. Inside jokes whispered just loud enough for me to catch the tail end. My manager, Brian, half my age, all swagger, would make these sly comments. "You still doing things the old-fashioned way, Bob?" The room would chuckle. I'd force a smile. At home, Ellen was distracted too. She'd stay on her phone longer than usual, hide the screen when I walk in, said it was just friends from her book club. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Still, something gnawed at me. That crawling feeling in your gut when you know a storm is coming, even though the sky looks clear. The breaking point came during a meeting with one of our biggest clients, the kind of account that made or broke careers. I had spent months building the relationship, lining up every detail. It was supposed to be my moment. Instead, Brian stole it right out from under me. I sat there, stunned, as he presented my work like it was his own. And the client? They ate it up. That was the day I resigned. Right there in that boardroom. I couldn't take it anymore. I walked out with my dignity intact, or so I thought. But what happened after? That's when I learned how deep betrayal can really go. You ever feel like the ground's been pulled out from under you? That's how it felt in the weeks after I quit. At first, Ellen tried to play supportive. "Maybe it's for the best, Bob. You've worked hard your whole life. Maybe it's time to rest. That word made me sick. The rest was for the dead. I started noticing how distant she really was. She'd make excuses to go out, grocery runs, errands, meeting with friends. She'd dress a little nicer than usual, put on lipstick I hadn't seen in years. I asked once who she was meeting. She snapped. "Why are you interrogating me? You've been paranoid ever since you left that job." But paranoia has a way of being right. One night, I couldn't shake the feeling. She said she was meeting her book club at the cafe downtown. I drove there, waited in the parking lot. Hours passed. No Ellen. So I drove back home. And there it was, her car, already in the driveway. I walked in through the back door, quiet as I could, and I heard it. A laugh, a man's laugh, low, confident. I froze. My blood went cold. I didn't storm in, didn't scream. I just stood there in the hallway, listening to my wife's voice tangled with his, every word carved into me like glass. When the man finally left, I saw him through the curtain, and my stomach dropped. It was Brian, the same smug bastard who'd humiliated me in that meeting, my manager, the kid who'd stolen my career right out from under me. And now he had my wife. I confronted her, of course. The fight that followed, I'll never forget it. "Ellen, how could you?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't deny it. Didn't even flinch. She just stared at me with this coldness I didn't recognize. "Bob, you're old. You're bitter. You've been stuck in the same place for years. I need more than that." Her words crushed me. But then she twisted the knife. "Brian makes me feel alive. Something you haven't done in a long time." That was the moment rage overtook sorrow. I've lost my job, my pride. And now, the woman I'd given my life to was sneaking around with the very man who'd ruined me. If you've ever felt betrayal like this, tell me in the comments, because stories like these, they hit way too close to home. I thought that was the worst of it, but I was wrong. A week later, I went to the bank, just routine checking balances, paying bills. Except when I opened the account, the numbers didn't add up. Large withdrawals, thousands gone, Ellen's signature. I confronted her again. She shrugged. "I deserve happiness, Bob. I'm not going to struggle with you for the rest of my life." That's when I realized she and Brian weren't just playing around. They were building something with my money, my life savings. I was nothing more than a stepping stone to them. That night, as I sat alone in the dark, the rage turned into something else. Something sharper. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. I wasn't going to be their victim. I was going to be their reckoning. When the anger settled, it didn't go away. It sharpened. Sorrow turned into an instrument I learned to play. For weeks, I barely slept. I walked around the house like a ghost in my own life, watching, listening, collecting small facts the way a man collects shells on a shore. Things that seemed meaningless at first became the hinges on which everything swung. I started small. I watched Brian's routines. He liked the coffee shop on Elm at 9, the gym at 6, the same rental car he used when he wanted to look casual. I learned the name of his dry cleaner, the model of his watch, and the scent of his cologne. I let anger teach me patience. I catalogued every insult, every smug smile. I wrote down his calls when he slipped and used his voicemail. I printed emails, I saved receipts, evidence, small and precise, because the world answers to proof more often than it does to please. I also learned how to use money as leverage. I had some savings left, 50,000 here, 30 there, stuff I'd squirreled away like a boy hiding candy. I wired it into places Brian never knew existed. I paid for subtle things. A private investigator to follow him for a week, a tech guy to mirror his work email for a single night, a forensics kid who could plant a breadcrumb that would look natural and not like a setup. I didn't want fireworks. I wanted a chess game. Move, respond, force, check. People ask me how you cross the line from hurt to planning revenge. It's simple and terrible. You stop seeing the person as someone who hurt you and start seeing them as a problem to be solved. You don't want them destroyed out of cruelty alone. You want the equation to balance. For me, balance meant taking back what they took and leaving them with the memory of being small. There were close calls. Twice, I almost got caught copying files at Brian's office had the lights stayed on a few seconds longer. I'd have been in handcuffs. Once Ellen almost saw me in my car outside the cafe and smiled in a way that made my guts clench. I learned to breathe through the panic. I learned to act normal in the exact way a man who is not normal acts normal. I tested his loyalties. I sent anonymous tips to our HR about Brett, another manager who had always been coy around us just to watch who defended whom. I leaked a fake spreadsheet to a contractor, knowing Brian would have to step in to rescue the client in front of the team. He did. He proved he could be both charming and ruthless. And in that balance, he made his mistakes. The plan came together like a slow cut. Make Brian look like the opportunist he pretended to be. Expose a pattern of theft. show he slept with clients and friends, and this part mattered most to make sure the paper trail led straight to him. I wanted him gone in a way that would hurt more than losing a job. I wanted him hollowed out. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to be erased. I rehearsed every step. I rewrote the emails before they ever existed. I fed supposed witnesses small details to see who replicated them. I hacked a backup drive and copied a set of files that implicated Brian in taking money from a client account. The tech kid did his work well, too well. He wove the breadcrumbs so neatly that when the lawyers asked for proof, there it was. IP logs, timestamps, spreadsheets with Brian's initials, and I kept an exit. If the plan failed, I'd lose everything: my home, the meager savings I had left, maybe even my freedom if they could prove I tampered with systems. I knew that. If my plan failed, I told myself in the mirror, I'll lose everything. But the risk made the work clean. I moved like a man who had nothing to lose. The scariest thing about it was how true that felt. If you're still here, you're my kind of person. Hit like, and let's go deeper into the plan. The execution was quieter than I expected. There was no dramatic reveal in the boardroom with fists and shouting. There were emails, phone calls, and the slow, bureaucratic clog of HR and legal. When you mount a campaign against someone inside a company, it's the waiting that does the work for you. People assume things happen fast. They don't. They unfold like a leak. First came the internal audit. I'd forwarded enough concerns to the right partners that an investigator was assigned. I watched meetings happen through blinds and via someone who owed me a favor in reconciliation. I had the tech kid send evidence to the investigator. I leaked screenshots of dissent in team chats to a blog that loved corporate scandals. Comments and whispers turned into questions. Questions turned into subpoenas. Brian's defenses were painstaking, but some of the files I'd prepared were damning. He had been careless. He had been cocky. He had been arrogant enough to think I wouldn't notice. Then came the hardest part. The sting that involved Ellen. I sent an anonymous tip to the client we'd been courting an external partner who'd been receiving slightly discrepant invoices. The client opened an inquiry. When they did, it pushed our CFO to dig. The paper trail, revised and amplified, led to the same files I'd planted that lined up comfortably against Brian. When the company called us into a meeting, Brian arrived in a suit that had always seemed too new for a man his age. He smiled the smile I had once admired and used to greet him with cordiality. For a moment I felt something like pity. Then the doors closed. He was escorted out. They said, suspended pending investigation. Then later, terminated. The media ate it up: blog posts, a few local TV spots. Brian's face was printed next to words like fraud and betrayal. Ellen watched it on her phone the day he left, and for the first time in months, she didn't smile. She looked hollow in a way I'd never seen. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was a loss. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction, and then something I didn't plan. 2 weeks later, Brian called from the holding cell before they'd processed him. He left a message on my voicemail. I listened in the dark. "Bob," he said, voice thin, "if you're listening, if you're the man I once worked with, there's something you should know. I did what I did because I thought it would keep you safe. I thought I could shield you from something bigger." The message ended there. I turned the phone off. My heart knocked like a trapped animal. I didn't want to hear it. I had wanted him gone. I had wanted to feel like the scales were finally even. But his words bent the room. A week later, a courier left a sealed envelope on my porch. No return address. Inside a thumb drive and a cheap Polaroid of Brian standing at my kitchen table with the same coffee ring on the counter, smiling the smile he used to use when he was younger and less cruel. The thumb drive had a single file, a short video, shaky, recorded from the vantage of a phone propped on a bookshelf. Brian looked at the camera directly. He looked sick and tired, and in that moment, terrifyingly honest. "Bob," he said, "I never wanted to hurt you. I came into your life because I thought you were being set up to take the fall. Ellen and a client were moving money through phantom invoices. I thought if I leaned on Ellen, if I made myself visible enough, I could uncover the mechanism and hand the evidence to someone who would protect you. I thought I was protecting you from getting indicted." He forced a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Then I made the mistake everyone makes. I became the story. I replayed that video over and over until the image blurred. Everything I'd built my plan around changed pitch in my hands. The meetings, the whispers, the odd emails were not signs of betrayal, but signs of a long, complicated, and desperate attempt to stop something worse. The files I'd planted, what if they'd corrupted the chain of custody Brian had been building to hand to investigators? What if my neat, surgical revenge had ripped the last thread of proof and scattered it into ash? I called the investigator listed on the video. He didn't pick up. I called the client. The line rang and went dead. I called Ellen. Her voicemail was full. I drove to Brian's apartment to see him. The building had police tape around it. Someone had set a fire in a stairwell arcson. Brian was in a holding cell for his own safety. He'd been attacked. He looked like a ghost. The investigator told me through the glass that evidence that might have led to Ellen had been corrupted, deleted, overwritten, lost. "We can't prove anything now," he said. In the weeks that followed, the story twisted in ways that felt like knife-turning. Brian's name was the one that stuck. Ellen quietly liquidated what remained of our savings and moved to a small apartment across state lines. She filed for divorce and claimed she had been a victim of Brian's manipulation. The client quietly adjusted their books and closed the file. No indictments, no recoveries. The only one who got punished was the man I'd broken. And me. I was left holding a house that felt twice as big, a safe I'd emptied of the money I'd used to fund my plan, and the burned remains of the briefcase where, apparently, Brian had been keeping a copy of his findings. The final blow was the call from the county prosecutor a month later. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "we found no proof of the embezzlement you reported. In fact, we found evidence that points to tampering with the company servers. We're looking into internal sabotage." I sat with the phone pressed to my ear for a long time. The room went white. The words came at me like a wave. Sabotage, tampering, evidence planted. My neat revenge had a neat price. When you plan revenge, you imagine a ledger. Them on one side, you on the other. You imagine clearing debt. What I hadn't imagined was that you can commit the very sin you hate, and then stand aghast when the mirror finally cracks. The twist was not that Brian was innocent. He was not entirely innocent. He had his faults. The twist was this. He had been trying to stop a larger crime, and my actions destroyed the only road to the truth. I had become the instrument of letting the real criminals walk free. In the quiet that followed, victory tasted like rust. I had my revenge. Brian's career was gone. Ellen had left, and the people who smiled at me in meetings no longer did. I had even recovered a portion of the money through civil maneuvers. But the solace I'd expected never came. Instead, there was a hole the size of everything I used to be. I burned the briefcase and watched the embers curl into the night, thinking of the look on Brian's face in that video, how he believed, for a moment, that what he was doing mattered. I thought about justice, about how easily it can be bent until it snaps. I thought about the man I became in the process, cunning, patient, cold. The hatred that fueled me had a taste I didn't like. It was the taste of something I recognized in the faces I'd once despised.